Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Bernice McDonald, author of, several books, Bernice, starting with your series. So the first book of the series, it's a Little Books of Courage series. Number one is Brave Enough to Be Myself.
Mhm.
Number two is Brave Enough to Let Go. And then you've got also Tame Your Fear and Name Him Fred and Never Give Up on True Love. I'm gonna plug that one. I'm gonna mention it even though it's outside of the series. All right, so lots of things to talk about, lots of books to talk about. But let's start with the series, The Little Books of Courage. So tell me about now. You also mentioned to me before we started recording that you are now working on the next book in that series to come out. So tell me about the series and what led you to start writing this series.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Of course, it's my passion. I didn't know it was my passion, but it suddenly has become my passion. And it all was born really out of discovering that my message was to bring courage to women. I watched my mom and my favorite aunts all kind of decline in their old age and kind of disappear from life, not believing, that they had much purpose in that last
Hmm.
quarter. I saw a lot of fears plague them and sort of shrink them down. And so I thought, I don't want to be like that. And I don't want other women to be like that. And so, as I discovered, I was always talking and coaching women about fear and about courage and taking those steps that are scary, but not impossible if you actually do it and take them in tiny, brave steps. So, I left my paid job and I went into full time coaching. I've been coaching on the side for years. And then it became the hustle that really
Mm,
discouraged me.
mm,
Coaching is a hustle in a way. You have to be so clear about your message and you have to get out there and get your clients. You have to persuade them to work with you. And it's just like, oh, this is just so time consuming and I'm not clear yet, but I knew what my message was. So I said, I don't even know where I got the idea, but all of a sudden I just said, you know what? I'm going to write a series of books that support this whole journey from not enough to brave enough, because that had become my message. And I'm going to take a lot of the blockers that keep us from reaching our full potential as people and as women. I'm going to write about each one and I'm going to demonstrate how they can move from not enough to brave enough using these tiny, brave steps that I knew worked because unfortunately I've experienced many of these blockers myself. So the first one I started with was brave enough to be myself. And I wanted them to be just really easily consumable books. Book because women who has time to read, right? Like there's just who takes the time to read. And so I wanted there to be lots of white space. I wanted it to be easy to skim. I wanted it to be deep and rich, but also easy to grab onto. So my first book is about half the size of the books that are coming, but it was an experiment and it really, I say it's my heart on paper because one of my biggest fears in life was to be myself. And I did not discover the secrets to that until I was in my 50s. And, I went through a divorce and it was kind of in between my marriages where I really came into that. And so that felt like that needed to be the place to start. And then brave enough to let go is about when life doesn't turn out the way you want it to, which is something that plagues so many of us. We get angry and women end up angry, people end up angry because their life didn't go the way they thought it should. And so that's what that book is about. The one coming out just very shortly is Brave Enough to Stop Disappearing, which is about stopping the people pleasing and starting to show up as yourself finally.
mm.
So that's where we're going with that.
Yeah. So, Bernice, why is that we are afraid to be ourselves? I feel like you mentioned that you came to that realization in your 50s, and I feel like I'm in my 40s and uh I feel like I'm starting to lean in a little bit more to who I really am, but like what stops us from that all of those years of our lives?
Well, the question, I have like three quick key questions that I ask in my business. And one of them is, who tells me who I am? And the conclusion that I finally came to in those years when I was suddenly, my life was upside down. And I had been a people pleaser my entire life up to that point, trying to get recognition, afraid that it wasn't enough. I think that that is the key thing. And I was letting so many other people tell me who I am, and I would let that be a mirror to me. It's like, oh, that person didn't like what I said. Oh, that person doesn't like me. They don't like this about my personality. Or that person, they sure didn't say much to really, it didn't sound as if they supported me very much in that, or it
Mhm.
really sounded like they thought I was kind of an idiot. So we take all of those things in, and that starts way back in our childhood, right? Moments, usually not even very many, but certain moments that were given the message of, I need to be quieter. I need to be not so annoying. I need to not ask stupid questions. All of those things define who we become, and we plant those statements in our heads like seeds, and
Uh-huh.
they grow into trees. And when by the time we're adults, we're hanging on to those, we're living by those statements.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things I just it's a big thing for me right now, so it's, like, such a great timely topic. I just feel like I've had these memories of people saying to me, like, "Oh, you're not like that," or "You don't do that," or "That's not like you," or, and those things where I'm like, "Is that not me, or is that because they don't see me in that way?" Right? And just, like, wrestling through that. So here's another question I have for you around that. And so I've also in the workplace, there's times where people will say like, "Oh, well, you do things this way or you're this way," or, and I struggle with, is that um is that person right? Or is that person right and I'm in denial about something about myself, right? Or are they coming at me from some other with some other purpose, right? Like, and I've struggled with that because I have like also memories in the workplace of people saying certain things, and then I'm like, that it's not true. Like, what that this thing that was said was not true. But is that because I am not being open to the feedback, or do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
how do you know what's real and what other because it's not everything that people say to you is accurate or
No.
meant for your good intentions, right? So, like, how do you sort through that kind of thing?
Well, you're doing exactly what you should do, is asking the questions. It's like, is that really true? Is that who I am? And so many people don't. They don't ask those questions. They don't even think
Mm.
they should ask those questions. They don't have permission to do that. And I think what happens is, we get the feeling inside. We feel like when somebody says something that's not exactly true of us, we get defensive almost. We go to the defensive place
Right.
instead of going to the curiosity place, or the, asking the questions place. Like, is that really true? And we don't, instead of many times standing up for ourselves, we end up just letting it pass, or we accept whatever judgment's been made on us. And we just, we don't have the confidence or even the certainty to be able to say, well, no, that's not exactly right. I'm not really like that. It might seem like I'm that way, but really I'm like this. Like, I mean, and that's really all it takes, is to be able to, uh, you know, come back with a statement that stands up for yourself, which is, like, in my you're talking exactly what my courage path is, I call, which is recognizing your fear first, which is what you said, and then embracing who you are, like really going into that place to ask, well, who am I, and who do I want to be? And then
Mhm.
the third thing is to stand up for that person. If you
Okay.
know that's who you are, then stand up for you. Not like in a combative way where you got your fists up,
Right.
but just in a gentle way where you say, really, who tells me who I am? And you make that decision, like, I tell me who I am. or God tells me who I am. Or, many people have those values and that standard that they live by. And that's the thing you need to explore about yourself and discover about yourself, because it's very exciting to do that. And it is such a relief to actually think, okay, this is who I am, and that's perfectly okay. I'm fine.
Mhm.
I don't have to be a clone of anybody else. I can be weird. I can have
Right.
these little idiosyncrasies. I can have these preferences. Like when I started to really think about who I am, I had to go back as far as thinking, well, what is my favorite color? What is my favorite food? And I did all of this in that whole second round of dating time where I was learning to stand up for myself and to recognize who I am. So, when someone invited me to go for Chinese food, and d- I like Chinese food, but say I didn't, a lot of times I would just go
Right.
because,
Yeah,
you know,
just like,
and
"Okay,
and that's
yeah."
that's okay as long as that's your choice and you make that decision out of a place of, "Oh, well, I don't mind going and supporting this person." But when you feel pushed into doing that, or, "Well, you like Chinese food, so let's go." And it's just like, "Well, no, I really don't." You know?
Yeah, yeah,
So, it's just that knowing who you are that brings you so much freedom in your
yeah,
life, you know? You can be
yeah,
tired when you're tired then. You can not know something and be okay to not know it because you don't care, like, what somebody else thinks. It's just
right. Yeah,
mm,
so not caring what somebody else thinks, I think that's the other thing is, like, sometimes I'm like, "Okay, this is just who I am, and that's okay," but I still worry about what other people think, right? And so how do we get over that?
well, I think it's still going back over and over again to say, this is who I am. So, how do I handle it when somebody can't accept that? Like, is it, how important is it in this situation? But even then, this is where you stand up for yourself. This is where you need to set, I hate the word, I really hate the word boundaries, but I call it like, you need to know where your line in the sand is.
Mhm,
So if it's not really that important, then back up a second. If part of who you are is somebody who cares about not hurting other people's feelings or not always being selfishly in the center and needing to do what you want, and I really think that when you truly know who you are and what your values are, those things are not there. I think that those are kind of defense mechanisms. But there
mhm,
is a part of us that loves to help other people, or loves to support other people, or loves to be there for other people, and we're willing to make the sacrifice that it takes sometimes to actually do it. Now when somebody doesn't appreciate what we did, or who we are in that, or thinks that we didn't do enough, that's when you go back and say, okay, is that true? And if it's not true, it might be true, but I gave it my all. I am somebody who always gives my all. And so I tried my best. What can I learn from this? And I
mhm.
think that that is probably the main key there.
Yeah. Uh, I wanna talk about "Tame Your Fear and Name Him Fred" because I love that title for one, but also I had a guest on, a long time ago, Emily Romero, who wrote the book Trust Yourself, and she also, at my writing retreat, she did a workshop session for us, and that title reminds me of the workshop session that she did,
Mhm.
which was, humanizing our fear, and she's a therapist, and she walked us through this activity of
Yeah.
humanizing your fear and visualizing your fear, like sitting down and having tea with your fear, whatever,
Yeah.
and anyway, so when I read the title of that book, I was like, "Gosh, this reminds me of that activity," and I had, another person or conversation recently that also, was similar, and I was like, "Gosh, this is like this new concept to me," but I want you to talk about it a little bit um, and yeah, how you humanize your fear and name him Fred and why.
That has changed my life. And that's exactly it, what you're talking about. And it is a well known psychological tool where people can separate themselves from their emotions, right? So two main incidents brought me to that place and made me and really changed my life. One was back when I was dating in between my marriages again. I learned a lot in those 6 years. And, when I was following a coach who was talking about building relationships and rebuilding relationships. And, she said, when to prepare yourself before you go on a date, she said, "You're gonna be afraid. Fear is going to show up. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look that fear, shrink him down from this fire breathing dragon that you think he is, down to a little Disney sized character. I want you to look him in the eye and I want you to say, thank you, fear, for trying to protect me. But I get it. However, I am not going to die here. So I need you to go over there in the corner and eat a cookie while I go on this date, because this is a time I need to grow. I need to take this step, even though I will still hear you chirping in the background. But I'm going to go ahead and do this anyway. So then fast forward years later, I read Elizabeth Gilbert's book,
Mm.
Big Magic, where
Uh-huh.
she talks about the fear of us putting ourselves out there. And I listened to that book on my walks one summer about 3 times. She also uses, personalizes fear or humanizes him.
Mhm.
But her take is on it. She wrote a letter to her fear and said, "I know you're always going to be with me. That's a given. But I want you to know right now, you can come in the car, but you are never driving again. I will always be driving." And so out of that came this whole idea of not only personalizing my fear, but to help me personal or humanize him. I gave him a name and I called him Fred. And that just came out of the blue. And I think it's because it's just fun. And he's my little, and the thing that is so powerful about this is that fear becomes not this thing that stops us in our tracks. It becomes a companion with us on our path. And it's always going to speak up, but it's speaking up from a protective perspective. Fred is now an advisor, a somebody that tells me, okay, something's going on here for me.
Mhm.
I can hear these messages coming to me like, "Oh, you are going to fall on your face," or "They are never going to accept that," or they're not going to like you. You don't belong there. Those things. It's like, okay, this is fear talking. So I acknowledge that. So where is that fear coming from and what is it it's saying exactly? And then from there, you can have a conversation with it. Say, okay, true. That could be. I might fall on my face. But you know what? If I don't try, I am always going to regret it.
Mm.
Or if I do fall on my face, we'll deal with it then. But I
Right.
need to take this step in order to grow.
Yeah. Love that.
Hmm.
You told me that that book is kind of outside of the series, right? So there's the little books of courage. That one is not part of the main series. Um, Now remind me the third book in the series that will be coming out, uh, at some point.
Sure, it's called Brave Enough to Stop Disappearing.
Stop
So,
it. Okay.
yeah, it's moving from, the people-pleasing realm to finally showing up for yourself. And again, it's all related to that, what do people think of me? Or who
Mhm.
do I really want to be? I really want to place into the hands of women the courage to actually believe that they're okay just as they are. That I have what I call strange jewels, which is a term I also got from Elizabeth Gilbert's book. And what I've come to see them as, it's not exactly the same as what she describes, but to me, they have become those things that we tamp down because we've been told they're not enough. Or the things that we think are so ordinary, they're really not that spectacular. So why would I even talk about it or use it or whatever? But I believe that they are the keys to actually becoming who we are. Because when you can pick out those qualities that you do better than anybody else, and everybody has them,
Mhm.
everybody in your own unique way. It's your own unique perspective. It's you being you. When you can tap into that, it gives you those replies to Fred. When fear pipes up, you can say, "All right, this is what I'm good at, and I'm going to go with this I'm going to go in this direction, and I'm not going to apologize for who I am. I'm just going to be who I am." And that
Mhm.
puts you in front of other people. It takes you into rooms where you might be afraid to go, and you think, "You know what? I'm just going to, instead of thinking what everybody else thinks about me, I'm going to go in this room and I'm going to look," because maybe one of your strange jewels is that you're a really compassionate person or you're really sensitive. And so you look for the person in the room that looks uncomfortable and you're going to go find them and talk to them, to help them feel comfortable. So it totally changes your focus and it totally takes the pressure off of you to be like everybody else because you just know these are my strengths. These are my gifts. I don't need to have that person's gifts, or I don't need to do it in the way that person does. I need to bring my own perspective.
Lovely. Love it, Bernice. Well,
Mhm.
so Bernice, the title of my podcast is Beyond the Bestseller because I know that people write books for more than becoming a bestseller or selling a million copies. So tell me a little bit about what was Beyond the Bestseller for you when you decided to sit down and write your first book.
Actually, it's interesting that it should even come up right now because I've been working with a coach, and we decided, I don't know if you've heard of Morning Miracle. I just came across that book. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And
Hal Elrod.
yes. And
Yes.
he took that book and he wrote that was his framework. That was his bottom line, right? And he went out there and he talked and talked and talked about just that. So then from that, when he got to 100,000 copies, like he doesn't recommend doing that before you sell 100,000 copies. That was in times past too. Things have shifted a bit now. But then he began to have other people write books in on different topics with that morning miracle portion in the beginning. So they would have 4 or 5 template chapters that they could fill in the blanks and then they could put their own stuff after that. So I am shifting my focus now to tiny brave steps. I've because that's the method I created about taking. That's my methodology. It's how you face fear. It's how then you take steps that are very small and you take steps that stretch you a little bit, but you just take a step. You take momentum. I even have an AI around that called the Tiny Brave Steps Generator because we need to know what those steps are, and sometimes we're just stuck. So now what I am doing after I finish this 3rd book in my series, I'm gonna let that series lie for a bit, and I'm going to write a methodology book on tiny, brave steps. And then out of that, really, I did it backwards, right? These books probably should have come out of that book, but that's okay. We'll just go with it because it gave me the foundation and it gave me a reason to write. So I'm excited about doing that, a bit intimidated, but I am excited because that will be the path, my courage path to discover who you are, to stand up for yourself, and then take your impact out into the world. Like become the person you're meant to be and do the thing you're meant to do. And
Yeah.
don't push away your passion.
Yeah. Love that. Well, Bernice, you're doing just amazing work to
Oh.
help encourage women and help women in their journeys. I love everything about all of what you shared. So thank you for that. I will link to the books in the show notes. How else can listeners or viewers find out more about you online and connect with you?
They can go to tinybravesteps.com. I'm just developing that website, but there they can get free access to the Tiny Brave Steps generator. So they will be able to start taking and you talk to it just like a friend. And it's all programmed with the things about Fred and all of the terminology or the tools that I use to help women along that path. So that is probably the best place to find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for all of the work you do. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
I so appreciate you having me on here, Kelly. Thank you so much.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.